My name's John Coleman, and I'm going to be talking on this film about teenagers and the digital world. I'm going to cover a number of different topics. I'm going to talk about the background to the digital. I'm going to talk about threats and opportunities. I'm going to explore the idea of what we call digital literacy and resilience. How can we help young people stay safe online? And I'm going to end by talking about the role of adults, the role of parents and carers, and what they can do to help young people manage this world. So let's start with the background. I think it's important just really to recognize that there's a generational thing, that young people, in a sense, this is part of their world, their normal world. But for adults, many adults, they've had to come to it and learn about it. And that's created a bit of a generational divide in the sense that there's more adult anxiety. Adults, parents and carers do worry about what young people are getting up to and what threats there are in social media, in the world of the virtual space. So I think that we have to explore that a bit, and it's certainly the case that young people have very different attitudes. So that distinction between the generations needs recognizing. It's also important that adults, of course, are users of the online world. And many young people say, but my mum or my dad is on their phone all the time. So how can they worry about me when they're using the phone? So parents, carers, adults generally are role models here. And we have to be careful not to criticize or take the view that being online isn't a good thing when we clearly are online. I think the other thing, just in terms of the background, is to recognize that things have changed substantially as a result of the pandemic, as a result of COVID, as a result of the fact that we experienced lockdown, but also that homeschooling became a thing. And of course, adults were working from home. So the use of the online world has changed. And to that extent, it has opened up opportunities. And we think, as adults think, well, you know, we've been able to work from home, we've been able to do all sorts of things, but that's true of young people too. And before the pandemic, you know, there was often in families a conflict around what used to be called screen time. How long are you online and so on? And I think we have to recognize that that has changed. And it's focused on the fact that so much can take place online. Meetings, schooling, obviously, and so on. And that, of course, is impacted on young people too. So the range of things that you can do online is now much wider. And young people have used the online world to keep in touch with friends, to engage in all sorts of activities, many of them very creative. So that's an important factor too. So let's move on now to think about the threats and the opportunities. And this is a way that it's often expressed, the good and the bad, if you like. And as I said at the beginning, adults, parents and carers do worry about the threats, and understandably, and rightly so. And the sorts of things that people worry about range from the possibility of young people meeting strangers online, to online bullying, the possibility of becoming addicted to gaming, I know some parents who talk about the worries about online purchasing, that you can use credit cards which you might use in a game, then that can extend to purchasing things and so on, even gambling. So yes, there are all these threats. And one of the things that I will talk about at the end is how can adults help young people to stay safe and to learn how to manage the threats. But we have to balance that with the opportunities. And for all of us, the online world, the virtual world, has provided just, well, it's almost impossible to describe the range of opportunities, from purchasing to communicating to having access to information that you would have had to go to a library for before this became available. And so all those things, all those possibilities do mean that the online world is a hugely rich resource. And for young people, of course, and it's hard for us to keep up, the range of opportunities is extending all the time. So new platforms are coming along. In fact, you will all have heard of TikTok. TikTok was initially a platform where you could do a little dance routine to a song. It was very much related to music and so on. Now it's extended to pretty well every sphere. And TikTok is a very powerful platform. And so, you know, even in the last year, that platform has changed and extended its reach and so on. And it's hard for us as adults to keep up with that. But one of the things I was interested in is just hearing young people talk about how they use social media platforms to chat, not necessarily to post images, of course that goes on, but actually as a medium to chat to friends. And, you know, some of us are old enough to remember how, teenagers used to come home from school and within 5 minutes was on the telephone talking to friends who they'd just seen 10 minutes ago. And parents would say, you know, why are you, get off the phone. You don't need to use the phone so much. Well, you know, that happens in a completely different way now, but it happens online. So all those things are really valuable, and we have to recognize that. So the question is, how can parents and carers have a sort of rounded or broad enough view of what's going on, and how teenagers, sons and daughters, are using this incredibly rich online world? And I think that one of the important things is really to keep communication open. It's often felt that you can't talk about it because we don't understand it and so on. But if you can find ways of talking about what you're doing, and adults sharing how they're using the online spaces, that opens up a channel of communication, if you like, that just makes it much easier for parents and carers to recognize all the positive things. Not to say that we should underestimate the potential threats, but it is really keeping a balance, keeping a sensible balance. And that really takes me nicely on to a discussion about what's called digital literacy, or sometimes media literacy. And this is a topic that is being gradually more and more taught in schools. But what do we mean by that? And how can it be helpful for adults? I think the first thing to say is the needs of young people will be different depending on their age and stage. So a 10-year-old, 11-year-old will not need the same degree of support and knowledge about literacy than, say, a 16-year-old. I think particularly we need to focus on that sort of early age, the 9 and 10-year-olds who are just really starting to use their phones, to play games, and to communicate. So that's a particularly important age. And of course, one of the things about social media is it provides a way of finding out whether people like what you say and what you do and what you appear, how you appear. And that sort of pressure for having more and more likes and so on, that's a particularly sensitive stage, and 9, 10, 11-year-olds are more sensitive to that than the older ones. But there's been a lot of talk about what we mean by this. So what is included in this idea of digital literacy, and how can parents and carers make use of these ideas? So the first thing that's really important is to be able to think ahead, to think about what the consequences are of whatever you do, whether it's posting an image of yourself, perhaps filtered to make it look better, sending a message, whatever it is, being able to think about what the consequences are going to be of that particular activity, pressing that particular button. And of course, we know that during these years, the ability to think ahead is sometimes, not always, but sometimes interrupted by what's going on in the brain, the pressure from those parts of the brain that are to do with needing instant rewards and so on. So being able to think ahead, and parents and carers can really help young people just by talking about that, just by thinking about, don't send something without thinking what people will think. The second thing is to understand what the risks are. So being able to explore what sort of risk there might be in any sort of behavior, whatever it is, whether it's sending an image, whether it's chatting to someone you don't know, and so on. And we also know that there are times when young people find it difficult to think about the risks, find it difficult to think ahead, as I've just been saying. So exploration of what risk means, and risk, of course, online is very different from risk in the real world. So in the real world, you would worry about your young person being out unaccompanied at night or in an unsafe place. You'd, risk is not having a way to communicate, your phone running out of charge, all those sorts of things. But in the online world, risk is a different thing. And then I think the third part of this is about learning from experience. So being able to, I suppose, I've talked about thinking ahead, but it's thinking backwards, isn't it? So if you've had an experience, let's say that you had an experience of someone sending you a nasty message, how did you deal with that? How did you learn how to block that person? How did you, who did you talk to, and so on? So being able to really gain from or learn from experience is another aspect of digital literacy. I think the other aspect of this, or another aspect of this, is about regulating, being able to manage your feelings. Because one of the things about all aspects of the digital world is that the platforms are very clever at manipulating one's feelings. So the idea of being able to get instant rewards is, of course, a seductive aspect of social media and platforms online. So how do we manage our feelings? How do we understand our feelings? And again, I think that's something that we can really introduce or include in any conversations, any communication we have with young people, because the more we recognize our feelings, but the more we recognize how easy it is to be sort of encouraged to look for instant reward, and just all that ability to stop and think, just really can be very, very helpful. A word that's often used in thinking about digital literacy is the word resilience. What does that mean? Well, it essentially means that when you have a setback, when you have a negative experience, when you feel put down or you feel bad because something hasn't gone right, or indeed when you experience bullying or threats or nasty messages or whatever, how do you bounce back from that? And one of the things I think is very important for parents and carers is to think about helping young people develop that resilience. So making sure that they know that if something unpleasant, something bad happens to them, that you are there to support them. And particularly, I think, around online bullying, getting messages that you don't want, having pornography appear or violent images appearing on your phone. How do you deal with that? And we have, as parents and carers, we have to recognize that that is going to happen, but there are lots of ways to manage it. So helping young people develop that resilience that enables them to overcome and not to be completely knocked back. I think the last thing is having support and for young people to know where to turn when exactly those sorts of experiences happen. So that takes me on neatly to the last section here, which is the role of adults. So what can adults do? And I know from talking to parents and carers that this is quite a tricky area, because there is that sense that, first of all, young people do need their privacy, so we don't want to intrude. And also they're doing things that we don't understand. So if we don't understand what it is the game they're playing or what they're doing, then it's sort of like a world that we can't enter. But actually, it's exactly the opposite. We really do have a role to play. And in a sense, I've already explored that a bit. We have a role to play in helping develop this digital literacy, this resilience, but also we have a role to play in sharing, as I said at the beginning, sharing our own experiences of the online world, and thinking about us as role models. So all those things are really important. But many parents and carers I know feel, well, is that the role of the school? Is that what the school should be doing? And of course, there is a role for the school, but school can't do everything. And so it's got to be a partnership. It's got to be something that parents and carers do take seriously. And some of the things, I think, just to be really aware how much time young people are spending online, and understanding what they're doing. We used to talk about screen time and how much screen time was right. But of course, with the pandemic, that's rather changed. But what happens, what you're doing online is really important. So if you're doing your homework, that's one thing. If you're chatting or being creative or making a music video or whatever. But if you're gaming, then there should be some limits. There should be some awareness of that you can't do that. You shouldn't be doing that for hours and hours. So I think for parents and carers, to be aware of what is happening and not to feel that it's a world you can't enter. I think we have to in some senses, of course, respect young people's privacy, because they do need to have a space that's theirs and that is not a place that parents will necessarily go. But it's very important not to opt out, not to say that's another, their use of digital devices, the smartphones and so on, is nothing to do with me, because it is to do with you. And just as parents and carers have a role in being aware of health issues, nutrition, sleep, exercise, whatever it is, we do, as parents and carers, have the responsibility to make sure our children, our young people, are safe in those sorts of areas. It is just the same for the online world. We are the key people, after all. We are, we are those who are going to help our young people through this stage and ensure that they will be able to stay safe online. And so, however hard it is, do feel that you can open up conversations, do feel that you have do accept that you have a role to make sure that you're playing a part in this sphere of your young people's lives, and enjoy what they are doing and celebrate the fact that the online world is an incredibly rich environment, but help them be safe by developing and helping them develop this resilience and literacy that I've talked about. Thank you very much.